You know, the clothes in your closet, they have a secret. A pretty big one, actually. They've been on this incredible hidden journey that starts in oil fields and on cotton farms. And, well, it often ends in some of the most remote and, frankly, devastated places on Earth. So, let's pull back the curtain and uncover the immense hidden cost of our global fashion addiction.
Our story starts, ironically, at the very end of a garment's life. Now what you're looking at, that's not some colorful abstract landscape. It's a literal mountain of discarded clothing in Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on the planet. These fashion graveyards have been growing since 2001, with just a single pile estimated to hold 100,000 tons of unwanted fabric. It's just staggering.
And that leads to a really haunting question, right? How does a simple t-shirt, something you might buy without a second thought, travel from a store shelf all the way here to become part of this massive textile graveyard? To find the answer, we have to rewind. We have to trace its journey from the very beginning.
Yeah, that mountain of waste in Chile, it isn't just some local problem. No, it's the most visible symptom of a huge global pollution machine. A system that has grown exponentially and become, well, phenomenally destructive. 170 billion. Let that number sink in. That's how many new pieces of clothing the global fashion industry churns out every single year. To put that into perspective, that's over 20 new items of clothing for every single person on Earth. But here's the craziest part. Roughly half of them are thrown away within that same year. Just gone.
And the environmental damage? It starts long before a piece of clothing is even stitched together. The journey from a raw fiber to a finished fabric is, to be blunt, a dirty and bloated process. And it all begins deep in the ground.
Okay, so essentially, our clothes begin their lives in one of two ways. They start as either cotton seeds, a notoriously thirsty and chemical-intensive crop, or as crude oil, the raw ingredient for synthetic fibers like polyester. Not great options, right?
And polyester is definitely king right now. It makes up nearly 70% of all textiles, but the price is immense. Producing it requires almost 342 million barrels of crude oil every year. And back in 2015, that process alone generated as much carbon pollution as 180 coal-fired power plants. It's just mind-boggling.
So what about the natural alternative, cotton? Well, that single cotton t-shirt in your drawer, it needed over 700 gallons of water just to grow its fibers. That's enough drinking water for one person for almost 3 years, for one t-shirt. All right, so once we have the fibers, they have to be dyed. And this next step is responsible for an estimated 20% of all water pollution worldwide. Factories often just dump their untreated, toxic wastewater directly into local rivers, like the Citarum in Indonesia. It was once a pristine waterway, and now it's one of the most polluted on Earth.
So what exactly is in this wastewater? Well, the World Bank has identified at least 72 toxic chemicals from industrial dyeing. Among them are really dangerous heavy metals, like lead.
And arsenic. You see, when these chemicals are flushed into waterways, they create this dark sludge that blocks sunlight, kills aquatic life, and just completely destroys entire ecosystems. And chromium. And the danger doesn't just stay in the rivers. This contaminated water is often used to irrigate local crops, so it ends up poisoning the food supply and causing severe health problems for the communities who live right there. It's a vicious cycle.
So after that toxic beginning, the next stage in a garment's life is just a frantic race. It's an all-out sprint from the factory floor to the online shopping cart, and believe me, the pace is only getting quicker. I mean, the pace of change has been absolutely dramatic. Traditional brands, they took months to release a new collection. Then came fast fashion players like Zara, who compressed that whole cycle down to just weeks. And now you have ultra-fast brands like Shein that can take a design from concept to sale in a matter of days. Days!
This incredible speed, it encourages a culture of disposability. It's designed to. Researchers found that the average pair of fast fashion jeans is worn just 7 times before being thrown out. 7. This gives it a carbon footprint per wear that's 11 times higher than traditional denim.
And that speed has a direct carbon cost. You see, a company like Zara primarily uses bulk shipping by sea and road. But the ultra-fast models, they rely on flying individual packages directly to you. And the result? Well, in 2023, Shein's shipping emissions were a whopping 8 times higher than Zara's owner.
Okay, so after a remarkably short life in our closets, the final journey for most of our clothing isn't to a new owner, but straight to the trash. And that, of course, brings us right back to where we started.
You know, a lot of us feel pretty good about donating our old clothes, right? We assume they'll be recycled. But this slide right here kind of shatters that myth. The reality is that only a tiny fraction, just 1%, is ever actually recycled back into new garments. The other 99%? Yeah, it meets a very different fate.
A whole lot of that 99% gets bundled up and exported. The U.S. alone ships about 700,000 tons of used clothing overseas every year. This massive volume just completely overwhelms local economies, it crushes their local textile industries, and eventually, it becomes waste, ending up right back in places like the Atacama Desert.
With a problem this vast and complex, it is really easy to feel overwhelmed. I get it, but a lot of people are asking the crucial question: can this broken, warp-speed industry ever truly mend its ways? Is there a fix? So one of the key ideas being talked about is circularity. This idea of creating a closed-loop system where old clothes are genuinely recycled into new ones. It sounds great, right? A powerful idea. But it faces huge challenges. For example, most of our clothes today are made from blended fabrics, and the technology to efficiently separate those cotton and polyester fibers at scale, it barely exists.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. As sustainable apparel founder Christy Kaler asks, if we're still consuming at a rapid rate, have we really done a better job? And experts agree. Better materials alone can't fix the issue if we don't address the core driver, which is the sheer speed and volume of our consumption.
But there is a glimmer of hope. We are starting to see some real signs of systemic change. Governments are finally stepping in. The EU is banning the destruction of unsold clothes. France is actually taxing fast fashion. And here, California is making manufacturers responsible for recycling. Things are happening. Look, the conclusion is pretty much unavoidable. The fashion industry as we know it is fundamentally broken. And mending it, that requires more than just individuals like you and me buying a little less. It demands a complete systemic rethinking of how we make, how we market, and how we value the very clothes on our backs. So the only real question left is, are we up for that challenge?